Hello and welcome to episode 64 of the Tomato Timer. And I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Natalija, who's a fellow at Freedom House. She's a one-year world ambassador, and she used to be one of the Latvian's youth delegates to the United Nations. Natalija, it's so good to have you. I've been waiting to speak with you for a very long time, so it's amazing to have you here.
Yes, thank you so much. I've been very much so looking forward to this conversation. I feel like all our conversations end up being very valuable, at least to me. So thank you so much for having me.
And vice versa. I have to kick off with learning a little bit about you when we met at COP26. You shared how you've been in this social activism work for such a young age, and I just wanted to learn more about what that journey was like, and what your learnings were of it as you've come to kind of grow through that ages.
Yes, so I started out when I was, I think, 16, 15, 16, something like that. And started out with just broader projects like European Youth Parliament, the Youth Parliament of Latvia, not really focusing on specific issues yet because I was very, very new to the whole activism and civic and social engagement type of world.
Mm-hmm.
And I started actually because friends of mine were in it and they said, "Oh, you might like this. This seems like you have opinions and you might want to get involved." And the first like big lesson I'd say was European Youth Parliament, obviously a Europe-wide organization, just meeting people from all over Europe and beyond, actually, and talking to them, hearing their perspectives on the different issues that we were trying to hypothetically solve during the sessions was kind of the first time I had the opportunity to experience that on such a large scale. So it really like lit a fire in me to seek that out more and seek those international settings, because I saw the value in just being around people who come from completely different backgrounds to mine. And then the Youth Parliament of Latvia, I quote unquote won the online elections. I got the most votes in the online elections, which meant that I had direct access to the Speaker of Parliament of the Republic of Latvia. And along with three other people, we were kind of the Presidium of the Youth Parliament. And the youth parliaments before us hadn't really thought of taking their engagement further. And just by talking to people in the administration of the parliament and members of parliament, we were able to get private one-on-one meetings with members of parliament, advising the president. I think I was like 18 years old then, being able to have a sit down with the president of the country, telling him about the issues that we see. And at that point I was starting to focus more on the issues I saw in our education system already. And so it really taught me the value of just asking, because
Yeah.
I don't know, having the audacity to ask, just be like, "So can we set up," being in high school, asking, "Can I set up a meeting with this member of parliament? I think we should talk about this," or just, making sure that the ball keeps rolling and that you're not just, "Okay, this was a great experience, let's move on to the next one," but actually maximizing it at that moment, and then, kind of creating fertile soil for whatever is coming up next. And then through the years, kind of just refining the issues that I cared most about, which ended up being mainly different equality issues, from LGBTQIA plus to women's rights and domestic violence and climate change and disinformation, and just the main topics that I feel like affect my peers and my country. And from there on out, law school tied in with a lot of activism, protests, and being able to advise politicians or just talk to them during working groups, and with the president, the prime minister. You kind of start to see how one opportunity just leads to the next,
Yeah.
and how if you're open to talking to people and get on their level, no matter what that might be, great things can happen, and you can improve life for both yourself and then your peers, hopefully. And that's what I tried to do with the UN Youth Delegacy. I was a UN Youth Delegate for a year and a half, focusing mostly on the issues that I just mentioned. And it was a really, really valuable experience. And we were able to get a lot of young people involved, a lot of young people who didn't even really know what the UN was before we, started talking to them. So it was, and it has been still. So the past, I'm 23 now, the past, 7 years or so have been very, very valuable, both personally and professionally. It's a part of who I am now. Activism is, it's a part of who I am, and I feel like we are kind of an activist generation.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky to be able to do it.
I love that. And I have multiple questions which came up, but I was not wanting to interrupt because there's such a beautifully articulate way you described it, all that you did. I think the first question was, and I think you helped us visualize it a little bit more anyway, but oftentimes the political systems are so political. There's so many biases and there's so many agendas and things going on. And many times you bring in youth and kind of poster boys and girls to kind of, just kind of be visuals, right? You had the audacity to ask for things, and you took a bigger chunk out of what your opportunity provided you. What are your feelings on that as you went through? There must have been times you must have felt like this is working, I'm seeing a change, and there must have been times where you didn't see that happening. So talk me through that.
Oh yeah, most of the time I didn't see change happening. So I'd say around a year and a half ago, maybe a little bit over a year and a half ago, I kind of became the default young person to invite to working groups or discussions where you need a young person in my country. So essentially I was like the main youth representative, no matter what the conversation was, what the working group was about. It was the responsibility essentially just fell on me, by default. And I could see so clearly how little thought had gone into including me, essentially. I was very happy to be there, and I always did my best to prepare and to consult with other people and delegate that task whenever I could. But when a very high ranking person in your country invites you, you don't really say no, and you don't say no to meeting presidents of other countries or of international institutions just because it's a very hard balance to strike, because you don't want to be rude and unappreciative, but at the same time you recognize that you might not be the best person for the job. And then you're risking kind of someone even, I don't know, less qualified, less related to the topic being invited just because it's the easy way out, or no youth representation at all because you don't know how they're gonna react. And so more often than not, you didn't reach any goals, and it didn't even, my goal was always to make sure that I started a conversation and I left a lingering thought in their head, even if it didn't result in immediate action. But and so that's why whenever I organized an event or a conference or a workshop as UN Youth Delegate, it was my rule that we had to have a document that came out of that discussion. So it wasn't just, speaking into the void, but we had a set list of issues that young people see and a set list of potential solutions they see for those issues. So we had something ready to bring, because sometimes it was literally, oh, this person has have to give a speech tomorrow morning. We need a youth perspective on environment. Give it to me in 3 hours, and it's like midnight or whatever. And so it would also serve me in those situations, but just in the long run, I immediately knew what I wanted, and I think that's part of the approach. You have to know what you want and what you want to bring attention to in trying to make it effective, and not just tokenism and just taking selfies with world leaders or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful, that articulation, and I personally have been doing it all morning and all afternoon, because putting stuff down on paper, you talk about so many things, and it's game changing, especially if you can then get those representatives or working group people to sign off on those things. Like, even if it's recommendations or ideas, it makes the world of a difference to go beyond an ephemeral conversation that just lived in that moment. The other question I had for you was the fact that then you transitioned from school, and in your various roles and capacities working in these kind of different parliamentarian groups, to go to law school. was that decision informed by your experiences of this kind of activism work, or was it independent? Were you going to go into it anyway?
Oof, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I applied for at least a dozen universities for programs ranging from directing to aerospace engineering
Wow.
to journalism, medicine, genetical engineering. I was all over the place. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And law was something that I had always been kind of interested in, but at the same time said that I would never do because both of my parents are lawyers by education. So
Uh-huh.
it was kind of like I never want to do this, and then ended up doing exactly what both of my parents did. Um, but it was an intuitive decision. Again, I had thought my whole, I don't know, life essentially that I would go abroad for university because
Mhm.
that seemed like the right thing to do, the fun, exciting, valuable thing to do. And then I ended up, staying in Latvia, studying law in Latvia, which was a combination that I could not have imagined. And it was a fully intuitive decision. And, you know, I saw the need for a lot of changes to be made, and with time I started appreciating more and more the fact that I decided to study law instead of something like political science or international
Mm.
relations. And no shade to people who study IA or politics, but I've seen how quickly a strategically litigated constitutional court case can change legislation as opposed to years of working groups and panel discussions and consulting.
Mhm.
It just takes a lot longer and is oftentimes not as effective. So that was also kind of an affirming moment for me when I was like, okay, so law was probably the right choice. I don't know if I'll continue being a lawyer or working in I'm not a lawyer yet, but working in the legal field for my entire life. But I know that I definitely do not want to go into active politics. I don't want to be a politician. So there is kind of a balance that I'm looking to strike between
Mm.
solving the issues that I care about and maintaining a healthy private life, I would say.
Tell us a little bit about, unpack that for me a little bit more. You talk about strategic litigations and how it can affect the Constitution. I'd love to make it a little bit easier, layman terms
Mm.
for some of our listeners and for myself as well, please.
So how it works, at least in Latvia and other places, so you can strategically litigate an issue, go through essentially the court system, and
Mhm.
have, if it's a constitutional court in a country like Latvia with a similar legal system, you only need, or like the Supreme Court in the United States, you get like one landmark case for that issue. And then that gets translated into law, into legal practice, jurisprudence and everything
Mhm.
else. But you can also go through just the regular court system and create precedent that will make it easier for the people that come after
Mhm.
to reach a goal, for example, regarding civil partnerships or recognition of a family of a same-sex couple, and all of these, different things that kind of build up and lead to a bigger goal that you're trying to reach in the long term.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And when you shared this with me earlier in the year, it was also quite profound to see that these type of really difficult cases can result in not just solving that case, but actually every other case that comes after can have a reference point and point towards something that actually went through the legal systems and
Mm.
so creates a precedent. So it's an incredibly impactful way, and one that I didn't realize
Mm.
that existed. So it's really interesting to
I
hear.
didn't either. I didn't either before I saw it
Yeah.
happen. Yeah.
I want to ask the next question, and I've actually written it up, and I often don't do that, but I'd like to read it out if you don't mind. So it's a bit of a controversial topic, but here it goes. To be able to work on global social problems, one must be in a situation where one does not need to think about where their next meal is going to come from. It comes from a place of privilege. How does one go about this? Much of the work social entrepreneurs or youth activists do is unpaid. It doesn't directly support your career and needs huge amounts of social capital to even enter. What do you think about the contradiction between those with a lived experience of the problem versus those who witness and try to solve it but don't actually face it themselves?
Yes, this is a very good question that we have talked about in the past, and I think about and discuss a lot as well. And so I think the first thing that should be said here is that privilege must be recognized. It can't
Mm,
you can't just go about, oh, I'm gonna, without any self-awareness. I think self-awareness is a big part of being an activist, and a big part about caring about different issues that might not directly impact you. And privilege in this case can also be a tool. The problem still exists, no matter if it exists for you or for somebody else. And if you're in a position to, volunteer your time, or to do an unpaid internship, or to do something outside of your daily work or daily studying to improve a situation for someone, for example, in your community, why shouldn't you do that? Well, the second part of your question comes in is, can you fully actually understand the issue, being somebody who is not fully affected by it? And then it kind of like creates this cycle in my head of, I've talked to people before, and I've been called out on Twitter before, for example, for coming from a fairly privileged background, which I have never denied, and try very hard to maintain as a comment, like as a thread when I talk to people about my experiences and my life, essentially. I've been called out, by people saying that, oh, but why are you trying to solve this issue if it doesn't even affect you? You don't actually know what it's like or what it's about. You will never be able to fully understand it. And firstly, that is a very big assumption to make about somebody. You see a very small part of them, for example, online, not knowing them. You don't know if they might be privileged now. You don't know what their situation was like growing up. You don't know their family situation. You don't know a lot of things about people.
Yeah.
And secondly, while I publicly recognize my privilege and don't shy away from it, do you not want me to solve it then? Is that, what we end up with? Is that the solution, to just, oh, because you're not able to understand, you should not take part in trying to resolve it? Which I think it's not a productive way of looking at things, and it's based in principle. And I respect that, because the world is a very unfair place, and people have a lot of, feelings and emotions attached to privilege and opportunity that comes with privilege, and the ease of life that maybe comes with privilege. And I fully understand that position as well. But for me, the approach has been, as long as I'm staying respectful to a person that this is affecting, and I am not just projecting my own opinions and not falsely victimizing myself in some way, I think it's still better to try and improve a problem. And that is not taking the problem away from somebody in a way that makes it kind of, something of an analogy, I guess, is what's currently happening with the West's reaction to what's happening in Ukraine. A lot of people try to like sensationalize it and be like paranoid about it, even though it doesn't affect them. And the people there don't want you to be paranoid. They are still, standing strong, and they're hoping for the best possible outcome. And if you start, sounding off the alarm bells before anything actually happens, it ends up being more damaging. So I think it's a very fine line, and activism is privilege, and being an ally, for example, of the LGBT community is a privilege. And if you use that privilege for good and not selfishly, while it might benefit your career in some way, maybe that should not be your main goal. It's also a matter of, ethics and where your values are and why you're doing the things that you're doing, because oftentimes people have trouble understanding that I, for example, do a lot of the things I do just because I care, and just
not
because
it makes you look good.
Yeah, exactly. I do them because I genuinely care, and I want to solve these things or make them better, improve in some way. And for somebody who does not have the luxury of, going and changing or trying to change something that they care about that doesn't directly affect them, it might look suspicious, and rightfully so, because why are you coming in here? This doesn't affect you. You have, everybody has their issues. So it's a very complicated topic, and sorry for my messy answer, but I hope I got my point across somewhat.
No, I appreciate it very much, and it's something I think a lot about as well. Similarly, coming from a privileged background, but also similarly coming from a background which is not very far from, poverty, and seeing both viscerally, very real, very, very tangibly. Not even so, but even now I can go and kind of witness the differences in social classes and inequalities that exist. And similarly, going about, you went through the activism work, I went through a more of an entrepreneurial route, but to be able to think about doing something like, I don't know, working on a project for 7 years of my life and continuing my career in this space versus going down a very cushy job in the corporate world. It's a decision I've been able to make because I have a support system which goes much beyond what others have, essentially, and it's something I recognize, and I wish I could. My only kind of goal often is not to empathize, because I think it's actually, empathy is again a word that's being sensationalized, and you will see every company, corporate culture talking about empathy, and it really annoys me because empathy is such a powerful emotion, to the extent that highly empathetic people actually have challenges in going in through society because they're unable to face the pain of others, because that's how strong empathy is. So what we, most of the time when we say empathy, we probably mean sympathy, and even that to a very low degree, because you don't know how it feels like to not know whether you're going to be sleeping in your under a roof or not, or whether you're going to get food in the next week or not, or you're going to be living as a political asylum seeking refugee or not. So these are such profound challenges that we are unable to feel. That's simply it. But what we can do with our voices, with our backgrounds, with our support systems that exist, is at least try to represent them in the places that we can, make their voices heard. And we talk a lot about empowerment. If there are opportunities to empower them versus ourselves, no doubt about it, I know me, and I know you would at the same time, be trying to find opportunities to do so. But it's such a contradictory feeling, and I appreciate just talking through it, and just for myself as well, because it helps me feel a little bit more grounded and kind of understanding of it as well. To go from a quite philosophical question to a bit more of another thing that you've been working on, another project, which is really interesting and it connects with everything that we've discussed above. You are really interested in almost exposing the societal structures, the legal and political systems that exist in your own, but other parts of the world, our global systems as well, to a younger audience, to children and young children. Tell me about why this is a problem you're very passionate about, and why do you think it's important to do?
I think it's important, and it comes, I think, from also, yeah, my upbringing and my like activism background, is that I see how much can be achieved both for a person individually and for a larger goal by just becoming a bit more aware and becoming involved, like taking that one little extra step.
Mm-hmm.
And if you, for example, are not even informed about how your parliament works, or how to fill out a voting ballot to go
Yeah.
and vote, or how, essentially the basics of democracy, the personal is political, the political is personal. It's intertwined in our lives. And I feel like we grow up with a notion that politics is something distant, that politics
Mm-hmm.
is like a beast that regular people should not get involved in. I think that's the furthest thing from the truth that
Yeah.
that could be. And so I think starting young and educating kids and I don't know, teenagers or anyone really about what their country can do for them and what they can ask of their country and who they're supposed to be asking that from is a very valuable and kind of powerful start to, again, a generation of even more activists, a generation that, has higher voter turnouts and therefore hopefully a better functioning, better representative democracy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of, yeah, it's the cornerstone of everything we know. And while democracies might not be ideal, they're the best we have. And I'm committed to making sure that I'm not, or we're not, kind of like the last generation that sees that and that
Yeah.
has can be empowered by it and build a life in it. So that's where that comes from for me. And also having four younger sisters, I sadly don't get to see them very often.
Adorable.
Yes, but there are a huge driving force in my everyday life and work. And yeah, I always have them in the back of my mind when I'm doing things.
Yeah. I want to ask one final question. I know we're running out of time, but I need to hear it from you because I'm so inspired by what you've just shared. We shared kind of in external kind of channels as well. But you've been in the public eye for quite a while, from a very young age. You've been speaking publicly. You've been sharing publicly in written, spoken, different forms, at a very uh, you know malleable, metamorphizing stage of your life. It's a big challenge. So I wanted to hear from you, because there's young people out there who believe they want to get their message out, but they feel not confident, they feel anxious about those sort of things. How have you dealt with it, and what are the challenges that have come about? But what would you leave our audience inspired by?
Yes, I mean, I did start sharing my life online from a very young age, just out of curiosity for what that's like, and how it can influence my life or amplify things that I'm doing.
Mhm.
And I honestly have my online presence to thank for a lot of the experiences and a lot of the professional advancement that I've had. And while on the one hand it does, and it has in the past, discredited me to a lot of very serious people who just think I'm, I don't know, a person who does stuff online, and it can be a disadvantage to some point. I would never, you know, go back and do anything differently, really, because it led me to where I am now, and I would not be here right now if it hadn't been for my public presence, as small as it might have been, even in the beginning. It's I owe a lot to it, and a lot to the opportunity to share my thoughts online. And so my kind of approach is something that stuck with me from, it's something my father said to me when I was young, and he said, everything counts. And it's a very simple approach, but when you start applying the kind of thought of, oh, everything counts to your life, it actually creates this different perspective, I would say. So I think he said it to me for the first time when I wanted to skip dance class when I was a kid,
Mhm.
because I was tired. I just didn't want to go. I don't remember, but he said to me, like, everything counts. Just remember that, like, you skipping this class counts. You going to this class and doing, a great job also counts. So everything you do counts, no matter what it is, how small it is, how small it might be in the moment. It kind of influences your whole life in a way at the end.
Mhm.
So that is kind of the thought that I've been keeping, again, in the back of my head, doing everything I do, is that everything counts. The good, the bad, the ugly, everything counts.
Mhm.
And not having I don't have a plan for my life, so the everything counts uh, kind of approach also plays into that.
Yeah.
And so it's very simple, but I think everybody can take it and run with it, and see how it affects their perspectives of their own lives and their choices on the daily. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Very simple, but very, very powerful. Thank you so
Mm.
much, Natalija. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. And I hope you have a lovely, lovely day.
Thank you so much. It was lovely to be here.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.